My name is Iris Holloway, and I'm 35 years old. After 6 years working as an ICU nurse overseas, I flew home to surprise my mother in the $600,000 house I bought her. A woman I had never met in person opened my own front door, looked me up and down, and said, "The maid is out back." The maid was my mother, 66 years old, on her knees in a black apron, scrubbing a patio for another woman's dinner party in the house that has my name on the deed. My brother and his wife had been living there for 14 months. What I found inside that house was worse than what I found in the backyard. And what I did about it, by 9 o'clock that same night, is the reason my brother's wife still tells people I destroyed this family. Every lock, every emergency contact, every line of my will. Stay with me, because here's what none of them knew. The deed was in my backpack, and I had an appointment at 3. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women finally stop being quiet, and family learns the hard way that patience has a limit. If stories about standing up for the people who raised you speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe, so you never miss what happens when the calm one is the one holding the deed. To explain that doorstep, I have to go back 8 years, to a kitchen table covered in envelopes. My father, Roy Holloway, died of a heart attack on a Tuesday in October. He was a good man with a bad heart and worse insurance. When the funeral was paid for, my mother Ellen was 58 years old, a seamstress who hemmed curtains for other people's beautiful houses, and she was sitting on $70,000 of his medical debt. I was 27, 2 years into nursing, working nights at a hospital outside Dayton. I picked up every extra shift they would give me. Weekends, holidays, double time on Christmas. It wasn't enough. The interest grew faster than my paychecks did. My brother Derek was 30, building his own life, his own house, his own family plans, and I don't blame him for that. Somebody had to stay standing, but somebody also had to jump. When I was 29, a recruiter called about an ICU contract in Abu Dhabi. Almost 3 times my Dayton paycheck, tax-free, housing included. I remember reading the offer twice and thinking, this is either abandonment or a rescue, and I won't know which for years. My mother drove me to the Dayton airport herself. She pressed a tin of oatmeal cookies into my hands at security like I was 9 and going to camp. "Don't stay away too long, honey," she said. I promised her 2 years, 2 years to kill the debt, then home. Nurses run toward the thing everyone else runs from. Turns out that works on debt too. So I ran toward it. I flew 20 hours away from the only person who never asked me for anything, so I could take care of her. 6 years. I told her it would be 2. Remember that math, because my brother certainly never did. People hear nurse overseas and picture palm trees. Here is what it actually looked like. 12-hour shifts in a unit where nobody spoke my language except the monitors. Christmas mornings spent charting vitals while my family opened presents on a screen. My Aunt Carol's funeral, watched on a phone propped against a break room coffee machine. My engagement, ended politely in year 2 by a good man who said he couldn't marry a time zone. I paid off the last of Dad's $70,000 in year 3. I stood in a hospital stairwell with the confirmation on my phone and cried for exactly 1 flight of stairs, then went back to work. And then I did something that made all of it make sense. I opened a savings account and named it Roses. My mother has wanted a rose garden her whole life. Her parents cleaned schools for a living. She grew up scrubbing other people's floors, then sewed curtains for other people's windows for 40 years, and every house she ever loved belonged to someone else. When we were kids, she'd slow the car down past the pretty craftsman houses on the north side and say, "Someday, a yard with good sun." She never once asked for it out loud. That was the whole point of her. So every month, after rent and remittances, money went into Roses. Year 4, the account crossed $200,000, and I started calling realtors back home on my nights off. Some daughters send flowers on Sunday. I was saving up to send the whole garden. Every Sunday we talked, and every Sunday she asked if I was eating enough, and I looked at that account balance and kept my mouth shut. It was the best secret I ever kept. It was also the last year my secrets were the good kind. 2 years ago, I bought my mother a house. A two-story craftsman on Maplewood Court in Beaver Creek, Ohio. $600,000. Big kitchen, deep porch, and a backyard with good sun, the kind she used to slow the car down for. I put $210,000 down, everything in roses plus a little more, and took the mortgage in my name, auto-paid from my account overseas. I closed on it over a video call at 2 in the morning, Gulf time, signing papers while the desert was still dark. Our family lawyer in Dayton, Tom Berrigan, handled it. He's 60, careful, the kind of man who reads every line twice. He gave me one piece of advice I didn't fully appreciate at the time. Keep the title in your name for now, he said. Scammers target widows who suddenly own property. And frankly, Iris, keep it protected from anybody's creditors. Anybody's. I remember there was half a beat of silence on the line because we both knew my brother's business troubles had started, and neither of us said his name. The plan was simple. On my next long trip home, we'd sign a trust giving Mom the house for life. Airtight. Forever. Until then, my name stayed on the deed and I told almost no one. Mom told people her daughter helped with the down payment because she didn't want Derek to feel small. I let her say it. That little kindness of hers will matter later, so hold on to it. The day she got the keys, she stood on that porch and cried into the collar of her coat. And then she planted roses before she unpacked a single box. She called it the house that Iris built. My father used to say, "Take care of your mother." Not with words. I thought I finally had. I had no idea the hard part hadn't even started. Now I need to tell you about my brother, and I'm going to try to be fair, because for most of my life, Derek was worth being fair to. 38 years old. Construction manager. 15 years in. The guy who could read a blueprint upside down and shake every hand on a job site. He had a house, a truck, and a wife, named Melissa. He married at the courthouse 3 years ago, while I was mid-contract and couldn't fly back. I'd only ever seen her once, on a blurry video call where she waved from the edge of the frame and never quite sat down. Melissa grew up hard. Renters. Always. When she was 12, a landlord put her family's furniture on the curb, and her classmates walked past her mother's mattress on the way home from school. She told Derek she would never rent again. I understand that scar. I just didn't know yet what she'd be willing to do to keep it covered. 18 months ago, Derek's company went under. No warning, no severance, gone. 2 months later, the bank took his house. He called me exactly once during all of it, not to ask for help, to refuse it. I offered him a loan, quietly, no interest, no deadline, family terms. He let the silence go long, and then he said the sentence I've been hearing in my head ever since. You write checks, Iris. I show up. That's the difference between us. Then he laughed like it was a joke, and neither of us believed him. He would rather drown than take a rope from his little sister, because taking the rope meant admitting he was in the water. Pride is expensive. I just didn't know yet who'd be paying the bill. 2 months after the foreclosure, my mother called me with a small favor to ask. 14 months ago, my mother's Sunday call started with, "Honey, don't be mad." Never a good opener. Derek and Melissa need a place to land. Just a few weeks until he finds something. The house had 4 bedrooms and 1 widow. Of course I said yes. I want that on the record. I said yes because she wanted to help her son, and it was her home to share. I only set 2 conditions, and I set them out loud with Derek on the call. Temporary. And Mom is the lady of the house. Full stop. Derek was gracious. Charming even. In that way he could turn on like a porch light. We'll take better care of Mom than she takes care of us, he said, and Melissa's voice floated in from somewhere off screen, bright and sugared. We're so grateful, truly. That was the second time I ever heard my sister-in-law. Both times, off camera. 3 months in, Mom mentioned, light as a grocery list, that Melissa's mother, Sandra, had come for a weekend. Sandra's landlord had jacked her rent 40%, and she needed a breather. The weekend became a month. The month stopped being counted. I asked Mom if she was okay with a fourth adult in the house, and there was a pause I didn't like before she said, "It's fine, honey, the house is big." I've replayed that pause 100 times. A 4-bedroom house. A widow who owned none of it on paper and believed she owned all of it. 3 guests who believed they were done being guests. Looking back, the wedding I missed wasn't the expensive part. The expensive part was every small yes, stacking up quietly, like snow on a roof. Nobody hears the beam start to bend. You only hear it when it breaks. 9 months ago, Mom had her knee replaced, and that surgery became the hinge everything else swung on. Derek called me himself, warm and organized. "We're setting Mom up on the first floor. No stairs on that knee. Doctor's orders." It sounded loving. It sounded exactly like what I would have suggested, which is what made it such a clean trap. Then her phone broke. The Sunday calls moved to Derek's tablet, and the tablet lived in the kitchen, and Derek lived at the edge of every frame. My mother started appearing in an apron on Sunday mornings. Her face got thinner. Her hands got rougher, red at the knuckles, the way hands get from dishwater, not from gardening. When I asked why she seemed tired, Derek leaned in. "Mom loves keeping busy. You know her." Mom smiled at the camera like a hostage reading a statement, and I want to be clear. I saw it. I'm a nurse. I read faces for a living. So I acted. I mailed her a new phone. The package never arrived, and the tracking said delivered, signed for at the front door. I offered to pay for a cleaning lady, twice a week, my treat. Derek chuckled. "We're family, Iris. We don't need strangers in the house." 1 month, she said, real quiet. "Money's a little tight this month." And then changed the subject like she'd touched a hot stove, and the next Sunday the call dropped twice at strange moments. Here's why I didn't get on a plane that week. My unit was mid-accreditation, and I was the lead. Walking out meant losing my visa, breaking my contract, and abandoning 40 beds. I counted the days to my banked leave, the way some people count down to a wedding. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, somebody's money was going somewhere, and it wasn't hers. 2 things finally sent me to the airport. The first was a flower delivery. For Mom's 66th birthday, I ordered a bouquet, delivery photo requested, because I like proof more than promises. The photo came in at 9 in the morning her time. There's the porch of the house I bought. There's a woman in the background hanging laundry in a worn housecoat thin as a fence post, on her own birthday. The second was an email from June Aldrich, my mother's oldest church friend, 70 years old and sharp as a sewing needle. The subject line said, "Is your mother all right?" She wrote that Ellen had stopped coming to church. That the week before, she'd seen my mother carrying grocery bags across a wet parking lot in the rain, while a younger blonde woman waited in the car, dry, scrolling her phone. June ended it with one line that took the skin off me. "I don't like to interfere, but somebody's been rearranging your mother, and I thought her daughter should know." I read that email on a night shift in a supply closet, and I went very calm and very cold, the way I do when a patient starts to crash. Accreditation had just cleared. I had 3 weeks of banked leave approved by Friday. I booked the flight home and told no one in Ohio. Not Mom, especially not Derek. Then I emailed Tom Berrigan and confirmed the appointment we'd been planning for 2 years. Friday, 3 o'clock, sign the trust. I printed the whole file and zipped it into my backpack. Deed, mortgage, closing papers. Paper weighs almost nothing and it still holds a house up. 20 hours in the air, and I rehearsed one sentence. "Surprise, Mom." I never got to say it. The taxi turned onto Maplewood Court at 10:40 on a Friday morning, and there was a strange SUV parked in my mother's driveway like it had grown there. I rang the doorbell of the house I bought like a saleswoman. Ball cap, sunglasses, backpack, 20 hours of airplane on me. The door opened on a blonde woman in a silk robe with a coffee mug, and I knew her from one blurry wave 3 years ago. Melissa, my sister-in-law, in my doorway, looking me over the way you check produce. What I didn't know yet was that she'd posted an ad that week for a part-time girl to help clean before her dinner party. So when she saw a tired woman in a ball cap on the porch, she didn't see family. She saw the help arriving. "Oh, you're here about the cleaning?" she said, already turning away. "The maid is out back. She'll show you what needs doing." The maid. Then her phone rang, and she answered it, and she left my own front door hanging open behind her like I was a draft. I stood there 1 second, 2, letting that sentence finish landing. Then I stepped into my own foyer like a stranger. New smell. Some candle called ocean something. New photos on the mantle. Melissa and Derek at the courthouse. Melissa on a beach. Melissa's mother holding a wine glass. The spot where my father's picture used to hang held a framed sign that said, "Bless this home." Somewhere upstairs, a television talked to an empty room, and from the backyard came a sound I knew before I could name it, a scrape and a slosh. Patient. Over and over. A scrub brush on stone. Somebody was on their knees out there, getting a patio party ready. I walked toward the sound with my heart going like a code alarm, and I already knew. The way you know bad news through a door, exactly who I was about to find. My mother was on her knees on a folded foam pad, scrubbing the patio in a black apron. 66 years old, 9 months off a knee replacement, kneeling on stone. Her rose bushes, the whole reason for the yard with good sun, had been shoved into a shady corner in plastic pots to make room for a new party set with the tags still on. I said, "Mom." She turned, and for half a second I got the whole sunrise, her entire face lifting, my name breaking open in her mouth. "Iris." And then, I will never forget this, the light slammed shut. Her eyes went to the house, to the windows, checking. She got up wincing on that knee before I could reach her, gripped my arms and whispered in her own backyard, "Oh, honey, you can't just... They don't like surprises." They. She was whispering. My mother hugged me hard, then held me at arm's length like contraband, like something she'd get in trouble for. Her wrists were thinner than her gardening gloves. Her knuckles were cracked and red, dishwater hands, floor scrub hands, and the last time I'd held those hands they smelled like rose fertilizer and peppermint lotion. I kept my voice level, nurse level, and asked why she was scrubbing the patio. "Melissa's having her supper club tonight. I don't mind, honey. It keeps me busy." Keeps her busy. Where had I heard that? I asked why she was wearing an apron in her own yard, and she looked down at it as if she'd forgotten it was there. And then she said the thing that told me the shape of everything. "Don't say anything about the money, please." And then she stopped herself, both hands over her mouth, eyes wide, like the words had escaped on their own. She wouldn't explain the money, not yet, so I asked her to show me her room instead, and that's when the tour of my own house became a crime scene walk. She led me in through the kitchen door, past a counter crowded with party trays, to the sunroom off the laundry. A folding bed. A card table with her pills lined up in a plastic organizer. Cardboard boxes labeled Ellen in somebody else's handwriting, stacked 3 high, still packed after 9 months. Her wedding photo with Dad sat on the windowsill next to a bottle of dish soap. The washer and dryer shared a wall with her pillow. That was her room. Upstairs, she told me, plain as a bus schedule, Derek and Melissa had the master bedroom. Because of my knee, honey, the stairs. Sandra had Mom's old bedroom, the one with the good morning light. The third bedroom was Melissa's craft room now. The rose wallpaper Mom picked out the week she got the keys, the paper she'd waited 60 years to choose for a room of her own, had been stripped. "Melissa says florals date a house," Mom said, and there wasn't 1 ounce of anger in it, which is the part that scared me. Anger has a bottom. Acceptance doesn't. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet from a pizza chain, was a laminated sheet titled House Schedule. Ellen. Laundry, Monday, Thursday. Ellen. Bathrooms, Tuesday. Ellen. Dinner, daily, 6 o'clock. Little boxes, little check marks, Melissa's rounded handwriting. My mother had a chore chart in the house I bought her, laminated, so it would last. I was still staring at it when the garage door rumbled under the floor and Mom's hand closed on my sleeve. "That's Derek. Honey, please. Be nice." My brother came through the garage door with grocery bags and froze for half a breath, and I watched him choose a face. He chose, delighted. The hero returns. Big arms, big hug, big laugh, the porch light charm switched all the way on. Why didn't you call? Mel, look who's here. Melissa appeared in the doorway, and I watched her rewind the morning in her head, the porch, the ball cap, the sentence. To her credit, she didn't flinch. She recalibrated. You should have called, I'd have made up the guest room, she said, sugar all the way through. What guest room? The house was full. From the living room, a voice like a bell being rung at staff. Ellen? Iced tea. Lemon this time. That was my introduction to Sandra Voss, 58, installed in my mother's bedroom, summoning my mother by first name like a bell. And my mother moved. 9 months of training in her knees. She just moved. I put my hand on her shoulder and got the picture myself, and Sandra looked at me the way you look at an appliance doing something unexpected. I kept my voice pleasant and asked Derek why our mother was sleeping next to the washing machine. His hand landed warm on my shoulder. Stairs are bad for her knee. You'd know that if you'd been here. But you were never here, Iris. He said it kindly. That's what made it obscene. Melissa slid in behind him. We keep Mom on a little routine. Seniors thrive on routine, I read that. I smiled and I nodded, and inside I went quiet as a prepped OR. In the ICU, you don't yell at the infection. You chart it. So I started charting. Lunch told me everything I still needed to know. Melissa set 4 plates at the table and a 5th on a tray. Mom likes eating in her room, she explained to me about my mother, standing right there. I pulled out the chair beside mine and said, "Sit with me, Mom." You'd think I'd pulled a fire alarm. 3 seconds of total stillness, Sandra's fork frozen midair, and then my mother sat, hands in her lap like a girl called to the principal's office. Melissa's smile thinned to wire. We have a system here, Iris. Everyone in this house earns their keep. Mom understands that. Earns her keep. In the house her daughter bought her. Sandra dabbed her mouth. It's called contributing, dear. Our generation understands that. Her generation. She's 8 years younger than my mother, and the only thing I ever saw her contribute was ice requests. Derek talked through all of it, loud and sunny, filling the room with plans. The yard was getting a fire pit. The porch needed composite decking. And down the line, who knows, he said, waving his fork at the walls. We fix it up right. Maybe sell. Get something with acreage. Sell. He said sell, easy as passing the salt, about a house that wasn't his, while our mother kept her eyes on her plate and I did the arithmetic of 14 months of quiet in her shoulders. Nobody at that table knew what was zipped inside the backpack hanging off my chair. I stood up, kissed the top of my mother's head, and said I needed to run to the bank after the long flight. It was even true. Melissa waved. Derek said, take the truck. I took the rental, and I took the mail I'd seen on the counter too. Before I tell you what I found in my mother's nightstand, tell me something in the comments. If you walked into the house you paid for and heard your own mother called the maid, could you have stayed quiet until 9 o'clock? Because staying quiet was the hardest thing I have ever done. If you're still with me, hit subscribe. You'll want to hear what the deed in my backpack was about to do. About that mail. While we cleared lunch, I'd seen a stack of opened envelopes on the counter, and the top one had my mother's name showing through the plastic window. Opened. Not by her, because she flinched when I touched it. It was a store card statement. Ellen Holloway. $3,900 of balance. I read the charges twice. A boutique in the green, a day spa, 2 restaurant tabs the size of car payments, a salon. My mother hasn't sat in a salon chair since my father's funeral, and she'd sooner tithe double than pay $40 for a lunch. The signature line on the receipts wasn't even a good forgery of her hand. In the kitchen, with the water running loud on purpose, Mom finally gave me the shape of the money in a whisper. Melissa had borrowed the card for convenience, and every month my mother handed Derek $600 in cash from her Social Security. He called it grocery money. He collected it, her word, collected, on the 3rd of the month, the day after her check landed. 14 months. I did the multiplication standing at the sink, the same way I do drug doses, fast and cold. 8,400 in grocery money, 3,900 on the card, $12,300 out of a widow whose check is $1,860 a month. Don't say anything, Mom whispered. He gets loud about money. Please. I dried my hands, folded the statement into my jacket, and said, "We're going to the bank. You're coming with me. Right now." From the living room, Melissa's voice sailed in. "Ellen? The patio isn't finished." And for the first time in 14 months, my mother didn't answer to her name. She went and got her coat. While Mom hunted for her good shoes in that sunroom, I picked her Bible up off the folding bed where it had slipped, and an envelope slid out of Psalms into my hand. I shouldn't have looked. I'm glad every day that I looked. It was an application to Golden Pines Senior Apartments, filled out in my mother's careful seamstress cursive. Behind it, a letter confirming her spot on the waiting list, dated 3 weeks ago. Behind that, a receipt for a $75 deposit to hold her place, and I knew without asking that she had saved it in ones and fives out of what was left of her check, because who counts out $75 any other way when somebody is collecting the rest? My mother was planning to move out, quietly, the way she does everything. Out of the house her daughter bought her, out of the yard with good sun, to a waiting list, so she wouldn't be a burden to one single person who was already living off her. She caught me holding it. She didn't grab for it. She just straightened up with that seamstress dignity and said, "It's a nice place, honey. They let you keep 2 flower pots." 2 flower pots. I bought that woman a 1/4 acre of good sun, and the people upstairs had shrunk her world down to 2 flower pots by a strange window. I folded that application and put it in the inside pocket of my jacket, flat against my sternum, and I kept my face nurse flat because she needed me level more than I needed to feel things. "Nobody is going anywhere, Mom," I said, "except the people upstairs." She looked at me the way she used to look at storm clouds from the porch, half hope, half fear. Then she put on her coat. In the rental car, with the doors shut and nobody's name on a schedule, my mother talked the whole drive and half the parking lot, and I just drove and let her. "It started kind," she said. "It really did. Derek fixed the gutters. Melissa cooked. Then the knee surgery, and the move downstairs that was doctor's orders. And somehow her furniture never came back down with her, just boxes. Then the schedule showed up on the fridge, laminated. Just to keep things fair. Her phone never came back from the repair shop, because a family plan on Derek's account was cheaper. Every step had a reason you couldn't argue with at the time. "That's how it works," she said. "Nobody ever asks you to hand over your whole life at once. They ask for one hallway at a time." And why didn't she tell me? She turned her wedding ring around her finger. "If you came home early, you'd lose the job, the visa, everything you bled for. I wasn't going to cost you your life twice." Twice. Like my 6 years were her fault. Then the sentence that rearranged my whole plan. "Anyway, honey, when I go to Golden Pines, the house passes to Derek someday, and maybe that settles him. It's really his only chance at one." She thought the house was hers. She thought it was already flowing toward her son. She was planning to erase herself to fund his second act, and she called it tidy. My hands were absolutely steady on the wheel, 10 and 2. "Mom," I said, "the house was never yours to leave him. It's mine. My name, alone, on the deed. And by tonight it'll be yours in a way nobody can ever touch." She turned in her seat. And for the first time all day, my mother looked like my mother. First Dayton Savings, 10 minutes from the house. I asked the teller for 14 months of statements on my mother's account, printed and stamped, and while the printer worked, an older teller with reading glasses on a chain leaned in, lowered her voice, and said, "We flagged some activity on this account once, ma'am. The gentleman said it was rent." The gentleman. On the account. Because 9 months ago, right after surgery, Mom had added Derek as an authorized user. To help with the bills while I was on the walker. She'd tried to undo it back in the spring, she told me, standing right at this counter, but removing him required both parties present, and Derek stayed busy for 3 straight months of Saturdays. Busy. The statements came off the printer warm, and there it was in black and white. The ugliest rhythm I've ever read. Social Security lands on the 2nd. 600 cash out on the 3rd. 14 times, like a metronome. Plus the odd 100 here, 60 there, gas stations, a sporting goods store. My mother pays for the privilege of scrubbing the patio. We fixed what could be fixed on the spot. New account, her name and mine, new passwords, her Social Security redirected into it starting next cycle. The old account, frozen for review, with the branch manager's card stapled to a dispute form about the card charges. I didn't raise my voice once. Paper doesn't need volume. Mom signed everything with that careful cursive, a little taller with each signature, and as we stood up, her phone buzzed on the counter. The cheap spare Derek had finally granted her on his family plan. A text from Melissa. Party at 6. Guests at 6:30 sharp. Wear the black apron. Mom read that text in the bank parking lot, and her thumb hovered over the reply. 14 months of yes ma'am loaded up in one thumb. I took the phone, gently, and read it again. Party at 6. Guests at 6:30. Wear the black apron. And something in me went very still and very clear, because do you see what Melissa had just done? She had rented a stage. She'd invited an audience, 6 women from the neighborhood and the church, into my house, tonight, to watch her play Lady of the Manor with my mother as the staff. Every witness I could ever want, hand-delivered, with place cards. She rented the stage. I decided to change the play. But I've spent 6 years asking patients for consent before I so much as move a pillow, and I wasn't going to steamroll my mother the way they had. So I asked her, straight, in the car. If I end this tonight, in front of people, papers on the table, can you stand next to me while I do it? She was quiet for a block and a half. Then she looked at her hands, those cracked knuckles, and she said, I've been embarrassed for 14 months, honey. One more night won't kill me, but it might just cure me. That's my mother. 40 years of hemming other people's curtains, and she can still cut fabric with one sentence. I checked the dashboard clock. 2:41. Lawyer at 3. Locksmith on standby for 7:30. I'd booked him from the bank lobby like a normal errand. Guests at 6:30. I had one afternoon to take my house back, and for the first time since that doorbell, I felt like I was on shift. Calm. Gloved. On time. Tom Berrigan's office smells like old paper and lemon polish, and it is my favorite smell in Ohio. 3 o'clock. The appointment I'd made from the other side of the world, back when this trip was supposed to be a happy surprise. The deed came out of my backpack a little creased from 20 hours of flying, and Tom flattened it with one hand like he was calming a nervous animal. Then we went to work, and by 4 o'clock, 4 signatures at a time, we had rebuilt the ground under my mother's feet. First, the trust. 2 years in the drafting, the house into it, with Ellen Holloway holding the right to live there for the rest of her life. Untouchable. Not by creditors, not by charm, not by anybody's second marriage, and I said, not even by me, and made Tom write it that way. Second, my will. The old one, written at 29 with airport sentimentality, split everything between Mom and Derek, half to the brother who showed up in case something happened to me abroad. Every line, Tom, I said. Rewrite every line. The new one. Everything to Mom. And after her, a nursing scholarship in the name of Roy and Ellen Holloway. Derek's name doesn't appear. It isn't rage, it's accuracy. Third, 3 letters on letterhead, revoking permission to occupy the property. Effective tonight. 1 each. Derek Holloway. Melissa Holloway. Sandra Voss. Fourth, a repayment agreement. $12,300, $250 a month, drafted and hungry for a signature. Tom reviewed the plan for tonight, the 2 options I'd offer them, and permitted himself one lawyer's smile. People who leave by choice can't play the victim later, he said. Then he asked what got me on the plane, and I told him about the doorstep and the sentence. He took his glasses off. She called you the help. In your house. Technically, I said. She was half right. Tonight, I'm going to be extremely helpful. Here's what I want you to hold on to while I set the table for that dinner party. The deed, the trust, the stamped bank statements. None of it was luck. It was 6 years of receipts. If someone in your family is quietly living off a parent right now, this next part is for you. Comment the deed if you're staying with me till 9 o'clock, and subscribe because the doorbell is about to ring. 4:15. From the car outside Tom's office, with Mom sipping the first coffee anybody had bought her in over a year, I worked down a list like a discharge checklist. Her clinic first. The emergency contact on file, Derek Holloway, son. Changed to Iris Holloway, daughter, with my number read back twice. Then the hospital system, then the new bank accounts alerts, all routed to us. And then the clinic receptionist said something that put frost on my spine even through the phone. Do you also want to update the healthcare proxy form from last fall? Last fall. 9 months ago, somebody had updated my mother's medical decision forms right after her knee surgery. Mom frowned into her coffee, trying to find the memory. Derek brought papers to the recovery room, insurance things. I was still floaty. She signed a proxy on painkillers, in a hospital bed, because her son put a pen in her hand. The clinic flagged it, voided it at our request, noted the file, and my mother executed a fresh one back upstairs in Tom's office before we left downtown, with a notary and, more importantly, with her eyes open. In the car she got quiet and then she defended him, because that's the tax mothers pay forever. He wasn't always like this, Iris. He used to carry my groceries when he was 9. I know, Mom. And Mom, I said, I'm not punishing the boy who carried the groceries. I'm stopping the man who took your bedroom. She looked out the window a while. Then she nodded. Once, like a stitch pulled tight. June called as we turned onto Maplewood Court, tickled to be invited to Melissa's party and fully briefed by nobody, and I asked her only this. Sit near Ellen tonight. Honey, June said, I've been praying somebody would come. I didn't know God booked economy. 5:05. Melissa was on the porch, arms crossed. Where have you two been? The patio. Mom's off tonight, I said, and walked past her into my house. By 5:30, the house had become Melissa's stage set. Cloth napkins folded into fans, candles down the table like a runway. Handwritten place cards, Melissa at the head. And laid out on the buffet, my mother's wedding china. The white and gold set she and Dad picked out in 1979, the set we were only allowed to touch on Thanksgiving. Sandra ran a finger around a gold rim and asked where it came from, and Melissa said, breezy as a catalog page, oh, it came with the house. It came with the house. There it was, their whole philosophy on one shelf. As far as Melissa was concerned, my mother came with the house too. Fixtures and fittings, an appliance that did bathrooms on Tuesdays. Sandra started in. Ellen, the ice. And I stepped into the doorway between them. I've got the ice, Sandra. She blinked at me like the dishwasher had spoken. Then Melissa came at us with the black apron over her arm, holding it out to my mother in front of me, and her eyes never left mine. It was a dare. Guests are coming, she said sweetly. We all play our part. I watched my mother's hands start to rise, 14 months of muscle memory, and I reached out and took the apron first. I'll take Mom's part tonight, I said, and tied it on. Melissa's face flickered, confusion, then triumph, and she trotted off to light candles, satisfied the MAID problem had solved itself, never once asking herself why a woman flies 20 hours to volunteer for kitchen duty. Here's why. The one pouring the tea hears every table. The help is invisible, and invisible is the best seat in the house. My mother caught my eye across the kitchen island, worried, and I gave her the smallest nod. 6:28, headlights swept the window. 6:30 sharp, the doorbell rang, and June Aldrich came in with a lemon cake and a wink so fast nobody else could have caught it. 6 guests, all women. 2 from Mom's church, 3 from the cul-de-sac, and June. Melissa gave the tour with a realtor's sweep of the arm. We bought at the right time. 600,000. And honestly, Derek has such plans for the backyard. We're doing a fire pit where those old rose bushes are. Those old rose bushes? One of the church ladies asked after. The sweet woman who waters the roses, I always see her out front. And Melissa laughed a laugh she'd clearly rehearsed. Derek's mom stays with us. She likes to help. It keeps her young. She's practically family staff. A beat, a giggle. I mean, practically family. Two guests laughed politely. June did not laugh. June set down her tea and looked at Melissa the way you look at a stain on good linen. Sandra, deep into the wine, went further. We took Ellen in, you know, she confided to the table, actually patting my mother's chair. Family looks after family, that's just how we were raised. Took her in Ellen's own dining room, on Ellen's own wedding china. I poured iced tea down the line and said nothing, counting like I count respirations, steady, clinical. In 6 years abroad, I learned you can carry a full tray with shaking hands if you breathe through your teeth. Derek kept glancing at me. Liars have smoke detectors in their skulls, and mine was pinging his all night, the sister in the apron who'd hardly said a thing since sunset. He finally cornered me in the hallway by the coat closet, voice low. Whatever you think you're doing. I'm serving dinner, Derek, I said. Sit down. And here's a thing I will remember on my deathbed. He searched my face, found something new there, and he went and sat down. The body knows a shift change before the brain does. Main course went out at 7:15. The locksmith texted me at 7:30. Here, parked 2 houses down, on schedule. With the plates cleared and the wine open, Derek stood up and dinged his glass with a knife, and I knew exactly what was coming, because humiliating me had always been the warm-up act to his best moods. To family, he announced, gathering the table with his eyes. You know, real family shows up. Some people chase money on the other side of the world and mail a check at Christmas. A pause for the little laugh, and he got it, from Melissa and Sandra anyway. But the ones who stay, the ones under this roof, they're what a home actually is. To this house, and the people who keep it. Here, here, said Sandra, glass high. Melissa raised hers and looked straight at me, standing by the buffet with the tea pitcher, and smiled her wire smile. You can toast too, hun. Then the kitchen, the dessert won't plate itself. One of the cul-de-sac women leaned toward her neighbor, not quietly enough. Isn't that Derek's sister? Melissa answered for the whole room. The one who works abroad. She's shy. And that's when my mother put her fork down. Ellen Holloway, 66, pushed back her chair and stood up at that table, knee and all, hands trembling, chin not trembling, and said, louder than I'd heard her speak in years, her name is Iris, and this… Mom. Derek's voice came down like a gavel. Sit. The table went dead. 6 guests suddenly fascinated by their napkins, my mother standing alone in the silence her son had built around her for 14 months. And that, right there, was the last brick. I untied the black apron, folded it once, and laid it over the back of a chair, done with the costume. Actually, Derek, I said, I'd love to toast. I lifted my backpack from the hook by the hutch, took out a pale yellow folder and set it down on the tablecloth next to the lemon cake. But first, one question. The room did that thing rooms do when the temperature changes. Everybody still, nobody breathing loudly. I kept my voice at handoff report level, flat and clear. Since we're toasting this roof, Derek, tell the table. Whose name is on this house? He snorted, but his eyes went to the folder. It's Mom's house. Family house. What is this? Melissa. Whose name? Melissa's chin came up. What kind of question? Sandra? Sandra pressed a hand to her chest, wine-flushed, delighted to be called on. Ellen's, obviously, and one day, when the Lord calls her home, it'll… And she stopped herself one breath too late, one greedy breath, and every woman at that table heard where the sentence was going. It'll be ours. June set her teacup down in its saucer with a click that sounded like a judge's gavel in the quiet. I opened the folder. I took out the top page and slid it across the tablecloth, past the candles until it stopped in front of my brother. Warranty deed, I said. Greene County. Read the grantee line out loud, Derek. You always told me I just write checks. I tapped the page once. Well, this is the biggest one. He picked it up. He was smiling when he started reading, the last smile of a man certain the world still owed him a break, and I watched the smile die of natural causes halfway down the page. His lips actually moved, and then the color left my brother's face in one smooth drain, top to bottom. The way it leaves a patient about 30 seconds before the monitors start telling you what you already know. Melissa said, "Derek?" He didn't answer. Sandra said, "Derek? What does it say?" He didn't answer. The paper made a sound in his hands, a small dry rattle, and everyone at the table heard that too. My mother stood beside her chair, both hands folded, watching her son learn to read. Iris, Marie, Holloway, Derek read, and somebody's spoon slipped and rang against the china like a tiny bell. I did not raise my voice. If anything, I lowered it, the way you talk in rooms where something serious is finally being handled. Paper 1, I said. The deed. I bought this house 2 years ago. $210,000 down. Mortgage in my name. Auto paid from Abu Dhabi. Never a day late. You've been living in your little sister's house since the day you carried your boxes in. Melissa's mouth opened and I kept going. Even, unhurried. Paper 2. As of 4 o'clock this afternoon, this house sits in a trust. My mother holds the legal right to live here for the rest of her life. It cannot be sold out from under her, borrowed against, or inherited around. Not by anyone at this table. There is no version of the future where this house becomes yours, Derek. There never was. I laid the last 3 letters down in front of them like dealing cards. 1, 2, 3. Paper 3. Permission to occupy this property. Revoked. On advice of counsel. Effective tonight. Derek Holloway, Melissa Holloway, Sandra Voss. Melissa came out of her chair so fast it barked against the floor. This is our home. And I looked at her, and I felt the whole day settle into my spine. 20 hours of flying, 14 months of lies, and I said, quieter than she was by half. No, it's the house my mother has a life right to, inside the walls I own. You've been guests here, guests who made the owner scrub your patio on her knees for tonight's party. June rose from her seat, deliberate as church, walked around the table and stood beside my mother. Then the church ladies stood up too. Then the dam went, all 3 at once. Melissa went shrill, and I mean glass-cracking shrill, about ingratitude, about everything we've done for your mother, about how I'd abandoned the family and she had held it together. Sandra found her pulpit voice. In my day, family did not do this to family. In my day. I set the laminated chore chart down on the tablecloth next to the deed. Ellen, bathrooms, Tuesday, in her daughter's rounded hand, checkboxes and all. In your day, Sandra, did dinner guests assign the homeowner bathroom duty? One of the cul-de-sac women made a sound into her napkin that wasn't quite a cough. Sandra's mouth worked and produced nothing. And Melissa, I'll give her this. She never runs out of ammunition, only aim, wheeled on me with her finger up. You think you can waltz in from your fancy job? This morning, I said, and something in my tone made even her stop. You opened my front door and you told me the maid is out back. The maid. Melissa. That was our mother. The whole table heard it land. Both church ladies were already moving, flanking my mother like an honor guard, one with an arm around her waist. And Derek came up out of his chair roaring, the last animal in the flood. You were never here. And slammed his palm on the table hard enough to jump the candles, wine trembling in 6 glasses, everyone flinching except me, and, I noticed, my mother. I waited for the wine to go still. I'm here now. That's all I gave him. He stood there with his hand flat on the table he didn't own, in the house he didn't own, breathing hard, and Melissa grabbed his arm and hissed, "Do something." And my brother looked around the room and discovered there was no audience left to perform for. I took out the last set of papers, the bank statements with the branch stamp still shiny, and set them beside the chore chart. Social Security lands on the 2nd, I said. 600 in cash leaves on the 3rd. 14 months in a row. Plus, 3,900 charged to her store card in a signature that isn't hers. $12,300 out of a 66-year-old widow's $1,860 a month. Ohio has a name for that, and a felony statute to go with it. So here is your one choice, not two. Option A, you're out of this house by 9 tonight, you sign this repayment agreement, $250 a month, and you collect the rest of your things by appointment. Option B, Monday morning I'm at the Beaver Creek Police Department with these statements, an eviction filing, and a civil suit, and 6 witnesses who heard every word said in this dining room tonight. I turned to Melissa, and I made myself say the next part gently, because it was true. You know what an eviction feels like, Melissa. You told Derek about the furniture on the curb when you were 12. I'm offering you the thing that landlord never offered your mother. A way out with your dignity, tonight. Take it. Her face did something complicated and furious, and she looked away first. And then my brother folded into his chair and put his hands over his face, and for a moment he was just Derek, and his voice came out cracked. I lost the job, Iris. Then the house. I couldn't be the man who lost everything twice, running this place. It was the only thing that still looked like winning. My mother's hand lifted toward him, mother to the bone, and he slapped it away without even looking and jabbed a finger at his wife. This is her fault. The apron, the schedule, all of it. Her idea. Melissa spun on him. My idea? Who told me his mother liked being useful? And there they were, the ones who stay, feeding on each other in front of the neighbors while my mother lowered her unheld hand. The guests left the way people leave a graveside, quiet, pressing my mother's hand on the way out. All but June, who marched into the kitchen and put the kettle on like she was garrisoning the place. Upstairs, drawers slammed and zippers screamed, and Melissa's voice came through the floor in one long sawtooth hiss. Sandra tried negotiating on the staircase, clutching the banister like a courtroom rail. Surely I can keep my room a week. I'm not part of whatever this... Your daughter's cousin has a couch, Sandra. You have until 9. Derek signed the repayment agreement at the kitchen table, my father's old oak table, hunched over it while June's kettle ticked. He signed with a pen from his dead company, the logo half worn off under his thumb. I noticed, and I let it alone. Some things collect their own debts. At 7:30 on the dot, the locksmith had arrived. Quiet man, drill like a dentist's. And now he moved from door to door while suitcase wheels growled down the driveway behind him, and I stood in the hall listening to the two sounds braid together, new locks going in, old tenants going out. If satisfaction has a soundtrack, it's that. 8:52. Melissa came down last, dragging the big suitcase, hair undone, robe swapped for street clothes, and she stopped at the console table and threw the house keys down hard enough to scratch the wood. She got her face close to mine. You'll die alone in this house. I held the door open for her. No. My mother almost did. Drive safe. And I closed the door behind her, softly, with the click of a woman who has nothing left to slam about. 8:57, the SUV's headlights raked the curtains once and slid away down Maplewood Court for good. At 9 o'clock exactly, the locksmith put 2 sets of new keys in my hand, one for my mother, one for me, and the new deadbolt turned over with a deep, oiled click, the most peaceful sound I'd heard in 6 years. I ran the checklist out loud because nurses close out a shift properly. Locks. Every door. Done. Emergency contacts. Her clinic, her hospital, her bank. Changed that afternoon. Derek's name gone from every file. The will and the trust. My phone buzzed as if on cue. A text from Tom Berrigan. Executed. Every line. TB. Then June and I carried my mother's things up the stairs she'd been banished from for 9 months, and we put her back where she belonged. Her wedding photo with Dad went on the dresser in the master bedroom. Her Bible went on the nightstand, the envelope gone from Psalms. Her clothes came out of cardboard and onto hangers, and June hung them by color because, she said, Ellen deserved a closet that looked like a garden. My mother stood in the middle of that big room, in the house her daughter bought her, and turned in a slow circle like a woman checking whether a dream had corners. Then she sat down on the edge of the bed and smoothed the quilt flat with both cracked hands. So careful, like she was afraid of wrinkling somebody else's things, and then she remembered they were hers. And that's when she finally came apart. The good kind. The kind of crying a body does when it's allowed to stop apologizing. "What do I do with this whole room, Iris?" she asked me, laughing and leaking at the same time. "Sleep in, Mom. That's the whole job now." On my way down, I found the black apron where Melissa had left it, folded it, and dropped it in the box of her forgotten things on the porch. It was never my mother's uniform. It was their flag, and they could keep it. Then Mom and June and I drank tea at my father's oak table, in the quietest kitchen in Ohio. 3 weeks later, here's where everything landed. Derek and Melissa are on her cousin's couch across town. He took a night shift at a distribution warehouse, and the first $250 hit my mother's new account on the first of the month, on time. I don't need his apology. I need his autopay. Sandra rents a room near her other daughter, who I'm told keeps a chore chart. Melissa's supper club never met again, though the same 6 women now visit my mother on Sunday afternoons, through the front door, carrying cake, and June sits at her right hand like a duchess. Mom is back in the third pew at church. Her rose bushes came out of the shady corner and went into the middle of the yard, the sunniest spot, where the fire pit was going to be, and they've already thrown new canes. The Golden Pines application came out of my jacket pocket on my last morning home. I offered it to her. Her choice. Always her choice now. She tore it in half and dropped it in the compost bucket. "Compost," she said. "It should at least feed the roses." I signed a new contract before I flew out. A rotation this time, 8 weeks on, 4 weeks home, and my 4 weeks belong to a bedroom upstairs with rose wallpaper going back on the walls, because florals date a house, and so do widows, and I intend for both to date it for a very long time. Derek texted me once, near the end of my leave. "Can we talk?" I looked at it for a while, standing in the yard with the hose in my hand. He's my brother. He carried her groceries when he was 9. He also collected $600 a month from her hand while she slept next to a washing machine. So I sent back the only terms I had. "When the last payment clears, then we'll see who shows up." He hasn't answered. The roses have. That's enough accounting for 1 year. My father used to say, "Take care of your mother, not with words." And it took me 6 years overseas and 1 dinner party at home to finally learn the whole meaning. You take care of her, not with words, and not even with money, but with your name on the right papers, your feet in the right doorway, and your voice, calm and unshaking, on the one night it counts. That's my story. 1 flight home, 1 folder of paper, and a mother asleep in the master bedroom she deserves. If this reminded you to check whose name is on a deed or who's listed as your parent's emergency contact, do it this week. If you've watched Family Mistake Kindness for Weakness, share this video with someone who needs it. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.